Welcome to Orchestration Tools for AWS Glue. The goal of this video is to help you understand which tools are commonly used with AWS Glue, what are the options, and how do you choose between tools. In a nutshell, some of the most popular tools we see used with AWS Glue are Glue Workflows, Step Functions, or Managed Workflows for Apache Airflow. There are many other tools out there, and often the best tool to add for Glue may be the tool that you are already using because you are familiar with it, its pros and cons, and continuing to use it does not involve adding a new service. But if you are in the market for a new service, this is our guide. Starting with AWS Glue Workflows. Glue Workflows are built into AWS Glue in the console, so using Glue Workflows does not involve adding a separate service, which some customers find to be an advantage from the perspective of security reviews, or even the perception of not needing to add an additional standalone service. Glue Workflows allow you to create complex ETL pipelines. In this relatively basic ETL pipeline, we start with a trigger, so this job will trigger monthly. Then we run two Glue jobs in parallel, one to duplicate records and one to fix phone numbers. Once both of those have completed successfully, we run a Glue crawler to update the schema of the resulting table. As this job executes, Glue Workflows will record execution progress and steps. Triggering in Glue Workflows can be schedule-based, so you could schedule a job to run hourly or daily, or it could be event-based, so you could configure an event bridge rule to trigger a Glue workflow once an upstream job completes. And of course, you could also trigger a Glue workflow to run on demand, for example, from Lambda code. Now that we've talked a little bit about Glue workflows, I'd like to move on to another option, which is AWS Step Functions. One of the limitations of Glue Workflows is that it works really only with Glue jobs and Glue components. Some customers want a broader set of actions to run, and so they may look at Step Functions. Step Functions is another AWS native tool for orchestrating jobs on AWS. It, however, has a much broader range of operators. So, for example, if you need to spin up an EMR cluster or create a DynamoDB table or run jobs on the EMR cluster or DynamoDB table, these are just a couple of examples of what Step Functions can do. It is also completely serverless, so there are no servers to manage, no version upgrades to handle. It supports retries of failed steps and organizes logs across different services. You can see here the link to some Lambda logs. Many customers have been using Step Functions successfully as an AWS native orchestration tool. But some customers prefer an open source-based tool, and so they may turn to Managed Workflows for Apache Airflow. Managed Workflows for Apache Airflow, or MWAA, is based on Apache Airflow, which means that customers can bring their existing Airflow ETL jobs, or DAGs, directly into the service. Apache Airflow includes a rich ecosystem of 800 plus operators, which allow for connectivity to many different data sources. Customers like the ability to use Python code to define their ETL jobs, and since Apache Airflow was built for data pipelines, it has specialized functionality like SLAs and backfills for ETL jobs. It is not serverless, so you can choose your Airflow version and configure resource autoscaling based on your needs. Now, I'm going to demo some of these tools in the console. First, I'm going to show you Glue Workflows. This is the AWS Glue console. I'm going to click on Workflows on the left here. You can see that I have an existing workflow. This is running two jobs in parallel, waiting for them to finish, running another set of Glue jobs, waiting for that to finish, and then running two Glue crawlers. It is started with a trigger, and that's a schedule-based trigger. If I click on Add Trigger here, you can see that I can choose between Schedule Event, On Demand, or Event Bridge trigger types. Moving on to Step Functions, if I click on the exact same workflow we showed earlier, this is the same workflow that you just saw in the Glue console, now represented in Step Functions. There are several different components to a Step Functions job. One is you can define the flow of the overall orchestration job, so you can choose to either run one step or a different one based on the logic. Then there is a large number of actions. Some of the actions I've mentioned include EMR actions, so you can set up an EMR cluster, or DynamoDB actions, so you can manipulate or update a DynamoDB table. There are quite a few options for Redshift, as well as some generative AI options. I don't have time to cover all of them, but there's quite a rich ecosystem available here. And lastly, you can actually build all of these jobs on your own. We have an AWS Glue immersion day, and one of the sections covers orchestration specifically. So if I click on Glue Workflows, you can see the step-by-step guide to creating the same Glue workflow that I just showed you. Same thing for Step Functions, and same thing for Airflow. So in summary, what's the right orchestration tool for you to use? If you have an existing ETL tool that fits your needs, consider keeping it. If not, customers like Glue Workflows because it's native to Glue. Customers sometimes use Step Functions because of its large set of native AWS integrations and its completely serverless architecture. And other customers prefer to use managed workflows for Apache Airflow because of its rich operator ecosystem, extensibility, and native ETL pipeline features like backfills and SLAs. And finally, this is the immersion day or lab, which I showed you. Thank you for listening and hope this was helpful.